Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 318, cover dated November 1994. The cover by Joe Madureira, inked by Terry Austin. It is an homage to John Byrne and Terry Austin's cover for Uncanny X-Men 138 when Cyclops left the X-Men after the death of Phoenix. And also homaged on the cover of New Mutants 99 by Rob Liefeld. So you can see here in the background various members of the X-Men. A couple of odd choices by Madureira, not quite getting the costumes right with Cyclops there. One other element of the harness is missing, the one that would go over his right shoulder. Also, why is Rogue in her Outback era costume? So a few odd choices, but overall I really like the drawing itself and the cover concept, an homage, as I said, originally to John Byrne and Terry Austin's cover to 138. So it looks like Jubilee is leaving the X-Men, and let's take a look and see how that all pans out in the issue itself. So there's an insert in this issue, got to get this bit of cardboard out of the way. And we have the title for the issue here, Moving Day, and it's billed as a prelude to Generation X, so coming in the aftermath of the events of the Phalanx Covenant summer crossover event. And the creative team here, Scott Lobdell, writer, Roger Cruz, guest penciler, so the Brazilian artist Roger Cruz filling in again on the title, and doing, you will see throughout, his best Jim Lee impression. Tim Townsend is the guest inker, and Townsend will collaborate with Madureira on the majority of the run, and blends very well with Madureira. Chris Eliopoulos letters, I don't know why he's calling himself Grover there, some Muppet reference, and Steve Buccellato colors. So these guys are moving the sign for Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. And they're having a little moan here about how in the 5 years they've been in town, they haven't seen one of the youngsters of said school, but then they do see one here coming down the steps from the entrance to the X-Mansion, and it is Angelo Espinosa, introduced in the Phalanx Covenant crossovers. And he is on his way out of the estate and looking to hail down a car, and so one appears in silhouette in the distance there, and he is looking to start his long journey to New York City and Kennedy International Airport. So it seems like he doesn't want to stay at Professor X's, and why might that be? So we have this red convertible sports car arrive, and who's the driver except for the Beast? And Espinosa, Skin, doesn't want the ride anymore, and he says, when Beast offers to give him a ride, he says, let me see, in my brief association with the X-Men, I've been kidnapped by the Phalanx, subjected to a string load of tests to determine the extent of my mutant ability. I've been offered to leave everyone I know and love to dedicate myself to fighting for a world of strangers who just happen to hate my guts because of what I look like. I've had all the help from the X-Men that I need. Thanks anyway. And this is interesting because we'll see who else is focused on in this issue. And Skin, what he says here about being hated on account of what he looks like, Skin does look different as a mutant. And that isn't the same for some of the other prospective members of Xavier's new school for gifted youngsters. But in any case, the Beast is unperturbed and tells him, look, just be duly informed, aside from the heretofore cautionary note regarding thumbing as a mode of transport, I should point out you're on an access road. By definition, a means of egress for the express purpose. I know what an access road is. So then you probably realize the odds of you getting a ride to catch your plane are, well, they're not on. So Skin gets in the car with Beast. I really like this panel with the car in silhouette, just the taillights there, and the choice to leave the trees on either side of the road open for the colorist for Buccellato. That's a really effective panel. So Skin gets in the car with Beast. He's not happy about being there. He says, if you have any words planned to convince me to stay, keep them to yourself. So the Beast just grumbles comically there. And I think that Cruz does a very good version of the Beast in this issue. He has studied very carefully how Jim Lee drew the Beast, and he's reproducing that faithfully here and doing a good job of it. So then the scene switches to the living room at Xavier's mansion. And we have Scott and Jean who are telling the professor about their time in the future, where they got to raise in different bodies Cyclops' son with Madeline Pryor, Nathan Christopher, or Nathan Dayspring, as was his name, in the future. And they have communicated to Professor X psionically the whole history of that decade that they spent in the future. And Cyclops is feeling guilty about telling Nathan that about promising him that he'd never be alone, and then leaving him as his essence was taken back centuries to his original body. So we have some narrative captions here. Professor Charles Xavier, founder of the aforementioned X-Men and possessed of the most powerful mutant mind on the planet. Scott Summers, along with his wife. He's only recently returned from a honeymoon spent 2,000 years in the future, raising the child they'd once thought lost to them forever. The wounds are still fresh. So, and we have a little note there from editor Bob Harris to see the Cyclops and Phoenix Limited series for the full story. But you get enough information from this little recap to know what the basics are without having to read that limited series. And Professor X says that it's going to take him some time to absorb the nearly 10 years of memory that they experience in the future, and that has been psionically shared with him. And why they requested the meeting immediately after the Phalanx affair is now revealed, because we wanted to provide you with as clear a picture of the origin of the legacy virus that we could. So Scott says, we think we witnessed the creation of the prototype before it could distinguish between human and mutant cellular cores before coming to this era. To release it into our atmosphere, Strife must have found a way for a so-called legacy virus to target mutant-specific genes. So Professor X is grateful that their discovery might provide a starting point, but then he becomes skeptical, but it might avail us nothing at all, only time will tell. And then he drops his tea. And what's going on? Why might he do such a thing? Well, Jean catches it telekinetically, and Scott asks him, is he all right? Perfectly fit, says the professor, but it is clear the strain of the past few days is catching up to me. I accept Banshee had to destroy my ready room in order to prevent the Phalanx access to vital information, but the truth of the matter is that explosion represented the loss of years of my life's work. That was in Uncanny X-Men 316, part 1 of the Phalanx Covenant crossover. And Scott responds saying, with all due respect, sir, that's hardly the case. Everything you've managed to accomplish over the decades goes a lot deeper than any data stored on a disk or two. Now, just commenting on the art here, I really like this panel, this top-down view of Scott and Jean and the professor in his wheelchair unit, the Shi'ar Tech one, and the open fireplace and all the rest of it. There's a good bit of work gone into that panel, but odd continuity gaff with Cyclops lacking the rest of the harness going down over his shoulder and down to his belt at the back of him. So odd that Cruz has missed out on that detail. And also something else to note is this is definitely a swipe, quote unquote, of a panel from Adjectiveless X-Men number 7, but it was of Wolverine. And here, this is like, you get to see what Cruz does, that he's studying Jim Lee's old artwork. That was a panel that was inked by Art T-Bear. So it was Jim Lee breakdowns inked up by Art T-Bear. It was of Wolverine. And here he's transformed that basic design, that 3/4 profile at an angle, and transformed it into Professor X here, mainly with the arched eyebrow and losing the little bend in the nose for Wolverine. And this is definitely a Jim Lee face of Professor X. So he's studying that art, but sometimes he does his own thing as well. Like this drawing of Jean here is not a copy of a Jim Lee drawing. And like this is a very capable panel. So it's interesting, the mix. This is also, he's looking at Jim Lee art from the Uncanny X-Men days for this one, and the lighting on the face. So interesting, his technique. Like obviously he's drawing that cup and saucer just off his own bat. He's not copying Jim Lee there. So intriguing what's going on here. And obviously for this, like he's doing his own style here on the 4 prospective members now of Generation X. He's not copying Jim Lee here, just imitating his style. So it's interesting to see that mix of copying by swiping and imitation in the style of Jim Lee. So we're at the Westchester Galleria, a shopping mall, and we've got, different from Skin, of course, the quote-unquote normal-looking members of the new Generation X team. And they've been shopping on Monet's credit card. And she says, if we're going to be the next generation of X-Men, I think it is incumbent upon us to look the part. Jubilee concurs, solve the world through shopping. Rad. Kind of makes me wonder whatever possessed me to leave the life of a California mall rat. And that takes us all the way back to Uncanny X-Men 244, which was our origin story for Jubilee. And when she followed the X-Women back from a trip to the mall to the outback in Australia, jumping into Gateway's teleportation portal. And we've got Paige here gasping at the cost of all the clothes, but Monet thinks that they cost less than nothing. So a real kind of gap in wealth and social status between Monet and Paige, and lots will be made of that in the new title. And also we get an interesting comment here on Sync and his huge bulk for the Phalanx Covenant crossover and in this issue, because Monet says, now do you want to find something that will fit after your mutant ability eventually sheds Sabretooth's added mass? So when we do see Sync in Generation X, he has a slimmer body build in that series. This is another Jim Lee swipe from issue 269 is my guess, again when he was inked by Art T-Bear, that Rogue story. And so we have the older X-Men members watching the kids on their shopping spree, and Banshee saying, look at them all getting along as if they've been kith and kin all their lives. Agreeing to be headmaster at Xavier's new school was probably the best decision I ever made. So we're just learning about that. We never see that on panel. We learn about it here. And Storm concurs, Bishop too, but then Bishop has a little bit more to say. Again, I think that is a swipe of a Jim Lee panel. Very Jim Lee looking of Bishop. And I think back in issue 8, that could be a swipe of Bishop from issue 8, Adjectiveless X-Men issue 8. So Bishop says, based on my experience dealing with field operatives in the XSE, I'd say you're going to have your hands full to overflowing. So Storm says, you're teasing, Bishop. Never. They're young, inexperienced, overly enthusiastic, and for the most part untrained in their powers. So he runs through all of them with his take on their different personalities and character. And Banshee concludes, I might as well accept the truth now. They're going to bury me alive, aren't they? And Storm says, you will do fine, old friend. Just fine. So Then we switch back to Beast and Skin going along Breakstone Lake there, and Beast is listening to the Rolling Stones on the radio, which Skin switches off, and he says, "Is this all life is to you, McCoy? One big series of laughs and songs and dances? Maybe you don't know this, tucked away in your make-believe X-world, but there is an entire planet out there of people who are hurting, suffering, starving." So Beast has to think about it, and he says, "You're afraid my constant singing might distract them from their otherwise moribund musings? Interesting, but that's not what Skin's getting at." And then he loses control here and begs Beast to stop the car. So it skids to a halt, and he asks him, what's happened, Angelo? What's wrong, son? What happened? Life happened." And then Skin explains, "About a year ago, my skin started turning grey, sagging, growing. For the most part, I can control it when I concentrate, less so when I'm forced to suffer idiots. Now here, you want to laugh, sing and dance? Have a fiesta." So it puts the music back on. Can't get no satisfaction. I really like this panel here of the two in silhouette and the Buccellatos setting sun here in the background, with the little kind of light flare on Beast's shoulder. That's really nicely done, and the falling leaves as well. Nice work by Roger Cruz, and this is a good panel of Beast too, but he's definitely looking at Jim Lee for that. And then we go back to the front lawn of the Xavier estate, and Emma Frost is overseeing these moving men here, putting a sign in place, and she says, "Careful with that sign, you plebeians. Costs above 12 times what I'm paying you to surprise a friend, quote unquote, of mine." So they protest that they're being careful as they can, and she thinks to herself, "I'm about 3 seconds away from taking over their minds and using their bodies to do this job myself." But considering Xavier isn't likely to appreciate that particular tact, she means tack, "I'll have to be patient. I despise being patient." So it's fun to see like Emma's the tension in her in living a different way, rather than the way she lived when she was White Queen, and being patient and not giving in to her temper. And then she twigs that she's being watched from the woods, and she twigs in particular the thoughts that she scans, and she recognizes them. So she makes her excuses. That's definitely a Jim Lee swipe there. Very much so. It's really jogging my memory, this one, like as if it might be from the Uncanny X-Men run by Lee. So who is it that's hiding out in the woods watching her? It's Drake. It's Robert Drake. And of course, there's some emotional, unfinished business going back to her taking over his body in issue 314. And he's there looking kind of grim-faced. And he says, "When you took over my body, when you violated my mind, you did things with my ice powers things I haven't figured out yet on my own. I just felt that after everything that happened, you owed me." And Emma responds, "But this body language here doesn't really fit. The pose doesn't really fit what she says." But she says, "In any case, it's not my fault. You're a pathetic little loser who never bothered to push himself." And that's interesting because Emma, of course, is going forward as co-headmaster, like headmistress of the new Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. And Bobby Drake, Iceman, was the youngest of the original 5 X-Men. But now he's an adult man. And as such, she's telling him he's a loser for never having bothered to push himself. And then she says here, and this is interesting, "Remember I was inside your head? We both know the reason you've been afraid to develop your powers over the years. Don't." And then he grabs her and says, "Stop playing games with me, Frost. I want to know exactly how you did what you did, or what? You're going to hurt me? Don't push me. You're a fool, Drake," she says. "I like that in a man," she whispers to him, as it seems like she's going to kiss him. And this has been read in a number of ways subsequently as an indication of, number one, Emma twigging that Iceman, Bobby Drake, is a closeted homosexual. It has been retrospectively read as that. And also with her flirting here, that she's being cruel, making the point that he's not interested in her or women really. But there's another way to read it too, and you can let me know in the comments how you read this 2 pages, where he is enraged and transforms into this spiky figure, complete with Wolverine hair and the ice claws as well, where she says, I'm giving you what you asked for. You want power, you want to be dangerous, to be in control, you want the respect you'll only get when you stop being the ineffectual clown that you are. Say it, Drake. Say it's what you want. Yes, I want all those things, he says. So is that not the reason that he's been afraid to develop his powers over the years? That he wants to be dangerous, that he wants power, and he didn't want to admit that? Or is it the other thing? Anyway, she says, fine, then learn how to do them on your own. I showed you a glimpse of your full potential. It's up to you to do something with that information. Whether that drives you forward or drives you crazy makes absolutely no difference to me. So she's not interested in helping a grown adult like Bobby Drake with his problems as she sets off for the Massachusetts Academy, the new location of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. And then we're back with Beast and Skin, and Beast hands over the keys to the car to him and says, take the car and drive wherever you want, Angelo. Find a place where music and laughter and singing doesn't belong, where sunshine and light and hope stands no chance. Settle down in a foxhole, pull a blanket over your head and ignore the rest of the world around you. And when you get there, kid, send me a postcard. And he walks off. This is a great panel as well, with the car stopped on the road and Beast walking towards us, a lot of him in shade and with his leather jacket. Looks really good. And then Skin making the decision to drive off. Hasta la vista, amigo, he says. But that's interesting, you know. See you again. And then back to Professor X's mansion. And Jubilee, her room's emptied out. She's all packed up to go. And she thinks, I first started hanging with the X-Men when they were in Australia. So yeah, back in Uncanny X-Men 244, right after my parents were killed. I wasn't scoping out a new home. I wasn't. But then she says aloud, but I guess I found one anyway. And then there's a shadow on her face. Tim Townsend here using a screen tone. You're leaving? Yeah. Archangel, I'm motoring. What's it to you? So we see Archangel mostly in silhouette here, just with the details of his costume showing. And also another screen tone on the wings. And then these couple of pages really aren't at the same level as the previous ones. They look a bit, rushed, and Archangel doesn't look very Jim Lee like there. It's strange. I can't figure out what's happened here, what's going on. Why is it that he's got this softer, un-Jim Lee like face? What's the reason for that? It could be that these could be the last couple of pages that Cruz drew for the issue. Artists don't necessarily draw the pages of a script they get in order, and he might have left these to the end. And then what we have is Archangel attempting to have a heart-to-heart with Jubilee, but she's having none of it. She's saying, I can count the number of times on 3 fingers that you've said more than 5 words, and all the time I've been cribbing here. I'm on my way out the door, and you decide to start getting all concerned on me. Later for that, dude, she says. And Warren tries to protest. He says, you're not being fair. I've always cared about you. Admittedly, I've never been the most expressive person when it comes to emoting, but... And she says to him, it's being called human, Warren. You might want to try it once in a while. I'm kind of sorry, sorto. It's just like sometimes I'm up all night wondering about my parents, why I never got to be as close to them as I am to Logan and everyone else. Every morning I come up with the same answer. It's because I never told them how I felt, never really showed it, never said it out loud. I just don't want the same thing to happen to you. You know, letting somebody you love know you love them isn't a bad thing, dude. And then in silhouette with the open door, no Jubilee. It's not a bad thing at all. So interesting that. These two characters that never really had any interactions, Lobdell twigging to that and making a scene out of it and bringing some emotion from it. So I think it works. And then this is pretty interesting too. So then we go down to the boathouse, and at the edge of the estate and on Breakstone Lake, that is the former boathouse, currently the home of Scott and Jean Summers. So this is where Scott and Jean are going to live together as man and wife on the Xavier estate. And with the other three original X-Men members busy in this issue, Beast with Skin, Iceman out in the woods confronting Emma, and Archangel having that unusual heart-to-heart with Jubilee. Who's helping them with the move down to the boathouse? It's Gambit. Of all people, it's kind of an odd one. And they have a little bit of a chat about marriage, and Scott here struggling with hooking up the VCR, even though he works very well on the Blackbird jet. And then he says to Gambit, "You were married once, Remy. You had a chance to have it all with Belladonna, didn't you?" And Gambit makes the point, "No. I had to marry my best friend just to keep our families from killing each other. What you have with Jean is love, and that makes all the difference in the world. And what you have with Rogue, what is that?" Scott asks him. "I guess that depends on which day of the week it is." Meaning, "None of your business, Scott," says Cyclops. Speaking of which, whose Three Stooges collected works video is this one? Scott here says, "That'd be mine. It was a gift, a wedding gift." So likely not a wedding gift, likely just his. And that's a funny little detail in terms of, you know, uptight Scott Summers, what kind of comedy he enjoys. Classic comedy. Three Stooges comedy. That's slapstick. Interesting that. And then we're outside the front of the mansion, and Banshee's getting ready to leave. Apparently Emma is left earlier in her limousine with the other young teenagers. And Professor X says, "Today makes it official. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters is being transplanted to the former Massachusetts Academy, while my family estate becomes the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning." So that's it. So this is an issue of transition and change. And Professor X says to Banshee, "I want you to know there is not a living soul I trust more than you to shoulder the responsibility of training this new generation of mutants." Banshee says, "And I won't be letting you down, but Charles, I have to tell you, I'm a bit unsure about your decision to involve the White Queen." So, what's the explanation for that? What's Xavier's explanation for that? Well, he says, "The former White Queen. Rest assured, Emma Frost has a much bigger heart, a greater capacity for compassion than even she suspects. If anyone can bring that to the surface, if anyone can help her deal with her guilt over the slaughter of the Hellions, you're the man to do it, Sean Cassidy." And that's why she has linked up with Professor X. It's all there at the end of Uncanny X-Men 314, where she breaks down on account of her guilt over the death of the Hellions, and she's trying to get over that and redeem herself by making an effort to train this new generation of mutants. And linking up with Xavier to do that. So Banshee says, "Okay, I'm sure you're right if we don't kill each other first." And the professor says, "You'll be fine, trust me." Why does everyone keep saying that? Says Banshee after his talk with Storm and Bishop at the mall. Then we turn the page and we've got Jubilee, so she's leaving. And she says, "Don't say nothing or I'll start crying." And then she whispers to him, and you know, we have to call back to Uncanny X-Men 297, where it's kind of Lobdell's first quiet issue like this issue, where he developed a relationship between Professor X and Jubilee, and it's kind of paying off now. And mostly silently, he's decided to kind of pare back on any dialogue, but Jubilee gets to say, whispers to the professor, "Thank you, Professor Xavier, for knowing when to hold on and when to let go." So off she goes, and the professor is left alone. But another car rolls up the driveway, and it's Skin. And he's obviously had a change of heart. Maybe he did listen to Beast. And he says, if you will have me at your school, I would like to join Banshee's program and become a student. So the professor's delighted. He and I would be honoured. Welcome. If you hurry, you can catch up with them. So Skin heads away, following Banshee following Emma in the limousine. And then our concluding captions, Professor Charles Xavier has always believed things happen for a reason. And here we've that sign that Emma erected behind him, Xavier Institute for Higher Learning, exactly when they're supposed to happen. Today he's turned over the mantle of headmaster to another at a time in his life when he realizes he has more to learn from his students, their lives, their hopes, their dreams, than he may ever be able to teach them. And that's the way it should be. The end as the sun sets. That's a nice panel there as well by Cruz. So, Generation X up next. So, a pretty interesting issue here where we have all 5 original X-Men featuring, but the focus is on the new generation and Professor X handing on the baton to 2 former villains, Banshee and the White Queen, and entrusting the new generation to them as the School for Gifted Youngsters becomes the Institute for Higher Learning. Interesting. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 318. If you did, please like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.